thank you very much for joining us today. Now, the topic for this session is to learn, to play, and to think. And we're going to talk about developing young learners, or helping young learners develop both linguistically and cognitively. And within the next 35 minutes, my aim is to show you that, well, it's not an either-or distinction. Actually, by the right choice of activities and by the right choice of tasks and exercises in the classroom, you can do both of these at the same time. In other words, kind of kill two birds with one stone, really. So there are activities, linguistic activities, which at the same time help learners develop cognitively. And this is what I want to show you. There are three verbs in the title for this session. Which do you think is the most popular? One of these three is the 12th most used verb in English after Richard and others from 2011. Could you possibly guess which one that might be? Let's play. Think and think. Okay, and we've got play, think, or learn. Play, think, or learn. These were the three words used in the thing. Okay. Surprisingly, this is the verb think. According, like I said, let me repeat it one more time after Richard and others, and the publication called Making Thinking Visible. The word think is the 12th most used verb in English. What does it mean? Basically, well, if thinking is so important in our dictionaries, can you now figure out how important it is in education? Now, I wanted to show you this for two reasons, really, to kind of, I found when I read about it, I found this fact really interesting, and it kind of, without further ado, it provides you guys and then allows me to give you the rationale for choosing this particular topic for today's session, okay? Proving that, yes, if thinking is so important in our dictionaries, then how important it must be in education. Now, I'm going to divide my session in three major elements. First, I'm going to talk about the concept of thinking in education very briefly, though. Then I'm going to talk about developing thinking skills in the language classroom. So I'll give you the reasons why it actually pays off and why it's effective to involve students cognitively during our lessons. And then I'm going to present you with a bunch of tasks and ideas and activities, like things to be ready-made and ready to use in the classroom early tomorrow morning. Let me give you a word of explanation, though. Points 1 and 2 are kind of, or a little bit theoretic. Let me perhaps explain why. First of all, such is my academic nature that, being occupied and with what I am, at the university, I usually look at the theoretical and research background before I talk about any issue in LT, really. There's another major reason for this, that for this inclusion of a little bit of theory in this session. I believe that, well, if I presented you with a set of activities for your classroom, you basically end up with limited resources, right? If, however, I manage to explain why these particular activities work, what makes them effective, right, for the learner and in your language classroom, you will be able later on to design such activities on your own. In other words, you will be able, looking at lesson design, you will be able to say which of the activities in the lesson or in the course book are the most effective. Okay, so covering points number 1 and 2, and of the way I see it, makes you reflective teacher for the future, right? It's not only about here and now and giving you some ideas, but kind of leaving you with some knowledge and some resources for reflection for the future. So let us start with the concept of thinking in education. Now, when I started researching the topic for this webinar, I found an interesting publication by Mosley and others from 2005. So there's a handbook for teachers, and it's called Frameworks for Thinking. The researchers there present as many as 42 different frameworks for categorizing thinking skills or cognitive skills in the language classroom, right? Or in education in general, based on 16 different principles, which only proves one more time, just like that verb think at the beginning, that this is a very extensive topic, right? And obviously, with only 35 minutes devoted to this session, we haven't got time to go over even, even like a fraction of these. There is, however, one which I'd like to discuss in greater detail, mainly because I would say it's the most powerful, it's the most influential in education in general. And this is like a recurring topic. If there are some novice teachers among you, perhaps you will find this a novelty. If not, if this is something that you're already familiar with, just a very brief revision of Bloom's taxonomy of educational goals. So one of the frameworks that pervades, or that has pervaded in the in education, really, not only language education, but in education in general, is the one compiled by Bloom. It's pretty old, as you can see, it dates back to 1956. And basically Bloom determined 6 different goals of education in general. It was knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Now, some time ago, there has been a review. Some minor adjustment have been introduced to that taxonomy. And apart from like a minor change where the evaluation kind of from place number 1 has changed to place number 2, the most important change for me really is that the nouns have been changed to verbs, right? So in other words, then the student's goal is not the knowledge, but student's goal is to remember. And then following that is to understand, to apply that knowledge, to analyze, to evaluate, and last but not least, to create, okay? These are the goals for education. So if you look at it at a kind of cognitive domain, right? Mind you that those 6 skills, or the 6 goals, are in fact divided into 2 different areas. The first area, that is remembering, understanding, and applying, are called lower order thinking skills. Lower order meaning less engaging, less intellectually demanding. This is how we could translate it. And then the next part of creating, evaluating, and analyzing will be the so-called higher order thinking skills, kind of constituting a real challenge and making students process the linguistic material, whatever they are learning, in detail, okay? And as you can imagine at this point, or as you can guess at this point, really, this is our aim in the classroom, right? To engage students cognitively in such a way that, the level of cognition kind of goes up, hence this is higher order, okay? To engage students, to make students cognitively engaged. This would be our goal in the classroom, also in the language classroom. Now, if at this point you feel that, it's a bit too far-fetched and too detached from, a regular English lesson, especially with young learners, let me show you this. Here comes an example of an activity. It's a reading activity. I didn't include the story. The story is not really that important. The important part of this exercise, the reading part here, comes with a comprehension question. So you can ask students, let's say they read a story about Claire, who's got different adventures and meets different people on her way. You can ask students the following: read the story and say how many people Claire meets on her way. In order to answer this question, students need to understand, as you can see, so they have to, their cognition is something towards the lower order thinking skills, right? Because they need to understand and they need to pick and choose the specific information from the text. However, if you want to make students think, or if you want to engage them cognitively a bit more, you might ask them the following question. Read the story and, for example, plan where Claire can go next. And this is then we're going to the higher order thinking skills, where the creating goal is. Or write Claire's letter to her mum about which person on her way she liked the most. And again, we put the students' cognitive engagement a bit up, because this is where students need to analyze or evaluate whatever they have read about, okay? So this is how we introduce the higher order thinking skills into the language classroom. Now, why is it so important, right? And here comes, and here comes the second point for my session. About developing thinking skills in the language classroom itself, right? So during the English lessons, really. Why is this cognitive thinking so important? Well, let me start with this. I generally believe that language learning is much more than fun and entertainment. Ever since really I remember, as a teacher trainer, as an author, I've been rather against something that we might call edutainment, right? So educational entertainment. I strongly believe that our goals as teachers is not to entertain our students, but to make them think and keep them focused and make them pay attention. And well, having said that, Nathan said before that I'm also a director of studies in a primary school. So I observe the lessons with young learners on a regular basis. Let me tell you this, I've seen so many lessons, I've observed so many lessons which used games, which apart from keeping children entertained, they did not teach them any language, okay? Hence, I am always, and I've always been in favor of such activities which make students think. Why? Because it is the cognitive engagement in the task that yields better learning outcomes. Sometimes, and this is an opinion that I've once heard. Teachers are afraid to include the intellectual challenge in the activities because they are afraid that it keeps distracted students, from the language. Or in other words, they want to take away or remove the intellectual challenge from the language activity, so that it is the language activity that becomes that is the most important goal of that particular task. I would say, however, that it works the other way around. The cognitive engagement basically makes students make effort, and it is the effort that comes in the form of deeper processing of the language that students are studying that basically leads to learning and to internalizing vocabulary and structures, okay? So I would say that actually the cognitive engagement, the effort, the deep processing, right? They do not act as an obstacle in language learning or in language development. On the contrary, they actually boost the process of the language, language development, because it, cognitive engagement and effort and deep processing, they simply make the language more memorable. Let me show you, I will show you in a moment how it works, okay? So this deep processing, right, is really all about, and that's what Scott Thornberry once called the cognitive depth of an activity. In other words, all of the activities that you do in the classroom can be either cognitively undemanding, that is super easy, I would say, or cognitively demanding, that is, they include some kind of intellectual challenge. Now, as you can imagine at this point, this is our goal, to make sure that at least 1 or 2 activities per lesson are cognitively demanding for learners, because this is where the learning takes place. This is what will help the learners remember the linguistic material better and for longer. And now I have a task for you again, to wake you up a little bit and to keep you guys cognitively engaged, really. There are 6 activities here, different activities. Could you please, but only 2 of them have the so-called cognitive depth, right? Or can be characterized with that cognitive depth. Which are they? And that's my question to you. If you could please write your answers in the yes. Number 3 is demanding. Susan was number 3, in fact. Okay. 2. Only 2 of them are demanding cognitively, not linguistically, cognitively. 3, 5, Lucyna said, I guess. Lucyna sounds Polish. 3 and 5, Ivona Kuźniak, thank you very much for that. Okay, thank you. 3, 5, 3, exactly. 3 is demanding, 5 is demanding. Okay. There are 800 of you, so I'm very nice. Very nice. Thank you very much for that. Okay. So look, let me comment on this very briefly. Okay. And you are right. These are points 3 and 5. If you ask students to listen to, you want to teach a lexical set. If you tell students just listen and repeat, there is no cognitive, there is no deep processing. There are no cognitive skills involved. There is no thinking involved. If, however, you give students a set of questions and you ask them to make questions with these words and ask their partner, this is where, the very act of creating a question with that particular word is cognitively demanding. And number 5, making true-false statements with the words so that the partner can guess which ones are true and which ones are false. I would say that, translating in the previous session and the previous slot when I had this session, translating the words was kind of controversial, right? But mind you that translating the words, no matter how difficult the words really are, involves no cognitive skills. There are no higher order thinking skills. The student doesn't have to create anything, doesn't have to evaluate or analyze absolutely anything. So I'm not saying here that this is a bad activity. I'm just saying that if we want to make sure that our students are cognitively challenged, or we want to help them develop cognitive skills, we kind of need to include other activities than just translating the words, than just listening and repeating. Okay. There's one caveat emptor, however, right? If we talk about, making students right? I already said that the most important thing is that we need to make the brain make effort, because this is how the learners actually learn and internalize new language. The only caveat emptor, like something we need to be aware of, is the fact that, well, there is no one single brain in our class, right? In the classroom. If you teach 20 students, chances are you've got 20 different little brains in the classroom, which basically means we are dealing with a diversity of brains. What does that mean? It basically means that we need to include a diversity of activities for cognitive development. If it's only the same task, if on every single lesson you ask students at the end, so now write the sentences with these words, write the sentence with these words, write the sentence with these words, you basically cover the needs of only one of those brains. Let's say the blue one in the middle. This is the brain of Mary, who likes, creating sentences with with the new vocabulary. But there are other students. So what we really need to do is to include a whole range of activities for cognitive development. And I will now show you how to do that. Just have a look at how late it is. But I think I'm okay. Okay, so I will now take a look. I will now present really a bunch of activities which, like I said, obviously their main aim is to help learners develop linguistically, that is to teach them some language or to revise some language, but they all have one thing in common. they are cognitively challenging, or in other words, they help learners develop cognitively and not only linguistically. And here they are. Now, again, when I was preparing, when I was researching, the literature for this particular session, I found a very interesting book by Puchta and Williams. It's about teaching thinking to young learners, and I really recommend it. And they have come up with as many as 15 categories for such activities. Categories, each category including at least 3 or 4 different activities. Okay. Now, as you can imagine, with only 15 minutes left, I do not have time to go over all of these. I have chosen a few. Well, basically, the choice is rather random, right? There was no particular, particular pattern behind it. What I really wanted to show you is like a whole range of different activities, and these are the categories that they would fall under. So I am going to show you a few activities based on comparison, a few activities based on categorizing. I'm going to show you how to help learners memorize the language material that they are learning during the lesson better and for longer, and how to include problem solving in the language classroom. Let us start with comparisons. Now, I'm sorry. One of the good old comparison activities, something that you're all very much familiar with, and not only as teachers, but most probably as learners, is the activity called odd one out. Okay. Now, usually the odd one out activity, it's all about. So we all know what it is about, but it very often includes ready-made, lines of words. And very often, the words that are, in one row or in one line, for students to choose the odd one out will be something like, I don't know, computer, tablet, smartphone, school bag. So very often what happens is that the odd one out is so obvious, but so obvious that actually the students do not need to take much time, and they certainly do not need to think much in order to choose the correct, to choose the odd one out, okay? The best odd one out activities, the way I see it at least, are based on activities or are based on groups of words which are theoretically the same or very similar. Mind you that in order to do such odd one out activities, okay, so or kind of involve learners in some thinking or cognitive development, or cognitive help them develop the cognitive skills in a kind of impromptu manner without much preparation, is whenever you have a set of words like here and give me 5 level 4, right? This is actually about speaking. The task is about speaking and its grammar, but there is a very nice set of words that we might use in the odd one out activity. What do you think could be the odd one out? And now, mind you, that the answers are not, it's not like a one straightforward answer, right? And again, there is no correct answer. The most important thing is for students to think this particular activity. If the choice of words here is similar, okay, students simply have to think. To my mind, that's the odd one out. That's the odd one out. Biscuits. Why? Because nuts and raisins and butter and cream are ingredients, right, of something. And biscuits, actually, I don't really know how to make biscuits, but they sound like a final product. And let me suggest something else now, because this is usually when the activity ends. But in order to make my students think even more, and in order to make my students' brains make effort, I always ask them this particular question. Once you've crossed out biscuits, what's another one out? Let's see what's another one out. To be honest, flour is the first flour. Why flour? This is also, I would say flour because, and also the explanation is important here, right? Because that's the only one you can't really eat straight, from the package and just take out and eat, right? You can't eat flour really, right? Exactly, you can't eat flour, for instance, okay? Mind you, somebody else could say, I'm not that much into recipes, I might say, but perhaps a child knows a recipe for their favorite cookies and they will say cream, okay? Cream is out because I use all the other ingredients to make my favorite chocolate chip cookies, which again, it doesn't really, it's not about giving the only one correct answer. It's more about making students think. And mind you that this odd one out does not only apply to vocabulary. What is the odd one out here? Any suggestions? Oh, we've got could. No, okay. See, the thing is, isn't, could. Okay, this is interesting because I'll show you what I've chosen as my odd one out. I've chosen can't because it's the only one that comes with one word for cannot. Okay. Now, isn't is not, will not, could not, does not. Cannot is only one sentence. Okay. Having said that, could you please, now can't is out. Could you please choose another one out? Or all models are except from isn't. So now maybe isn't is the second choice. Or maybe won't is the next choice because you've got is not, isn't, could not, one, does not, but you say you don't have won't, but have will not, made of two different words. Okay, so again, the most important thing here is not to give the ready, it's not that there is one obvious answer, but the fact that these activities make students think. Okay, so this is all about comparisons. Sorry, one more activity in the comparisons section. Sorry, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Venn diagram. I've noticed at some point that my son uses it in the school for comparing, but comparing ideas, not for language learning though, right? So why not use the same kind of Venn diagram, which is all about comparison, like as suggested at Spuchta and Williams, to compare two different words. Here, students create a Venn diagram comparing banana and pineapple. As you know, the one part goes, this part here is all about the features of bananas. This part here is all about the features of pineapples, but they will certainly have something in common, okay? Another example like that of making students think by completing a Venn diagram comes from Give Me Fire Level 4, right? The students have to copy the chart and complete it with the clothes that they know, okay? So again, above the waist, below the waist, which are two separate categories, but there will certainly be something in the middle. And again, look, mind you that the activity says the clothes that you know. So it's a kind of, review or revision. Instead of asking just students, so how do you say this? Or how do you say that? Or what do you see in the pictures, right? It's it might be much more effective to ask students to complete this Venn diagram because of the fact that the cognitive skills are involved as well. And these were all of the activities that I have shown so far are effective because there is one very important rule in language teaching, especially vocabulary teaching. The more decisions a learner takes about a language item, the more memorable it becomes. So, when you have to figure out, does it go to this category or that category? Or like if you have to do the odd one out activity based on 6 different words, you take several decisions, concerning these 6 different words. And if I were to choose 2 things that I'd like you to leave this webinar with, this is one of them. First, this is one, like the more decisions a learner takes about the language item, the more memorable the language item becomes. And the second one is something that I've shown a few slides before. We need to, in order to help learners remember better and for longer, we need to make their brains make effort. So these are 2 kind of slogans that, to my mind, are pretty useful, I have to admit. Okay, now, let's talk about categorizing for a moment. So, okay, assigning words to different categories. Mind you that basically the idea is still the same. Every time students every time a student assigns a word to a different category, he or she needs to take a decision or make a decision about it, okay? So, again, the activity that I'd like to show you is the very nice name, is again from Puchta and Williams. This is called Find Home for the Word, which is very nice for young learners because, you know, just categorize the words or put the words into different categories is not the best. I mean, it's okay, but it's not so nice, I would say. This one here says find the home for the word, but before students do this, there are different gestures and movements assigned to different categories. So for colors, students stand up. For numbers, they clap hands. For food, they raise their arms, and so on, okay? And now then what happens later on is that students this is a great activity, by the way, for revision, right? Students write the words on slips of paper, the words they remember. Let's say everybody has to write 2 words. They remember from the last year, the last semester, the last unit, whatever you want to revise, really. They write them on separate slips of paper. You walk around the class, you collect the slips of paper, and they draw them at random, reading out the word. Students have to assign the word to a given category, not by naming the category, but by doing whatever they are supposed to. So if you read out 1, students clap their hands. If you read out blue, students stand up, and so on. Okay, so this is a very nice activity, and like I said, categorizing is a perfect moment, or in other words, is perfect task for reviews. Okay, the activity that the page that you can see here. It's the unit 3, lesson 1. I love my city. Basically, the whole unit will be about places in the city. Before students, learn the new language, there's exercise 2, right? Copy the chart, complete it with the places, it's even marked, thinking skills. It's given me 5, level 5 this time, okay? Students have to write the names they can recall from their memory in the correct category. If it's where you go shopping, or if it's a place where you spend your free time, if it's a public building, or it's just something that you can see in the street. So it's not really a building, maybe a phone booth, for instance, right? Or a bench, or whatever they can actually recall. So like I said, that categorizing is perfect for review. And what I'd like to add at this point is that categorizing activities can take the form of very short and simple questions. You don't need an elaborate, extensive activities. For instance, which of these activities do you prefer doing in the morning as opposed to in the evening? Okay, so in the morning, I prefer doing sport and reading, or in the evening, I prefer reading, really. Okay, so this is what is required from the learner, is actually some kind of categorizing of the words that he or she is learning, that is the names of activities. Another example, food category, we're studying the names of food products. Which of these products are good for dinner, as opposed to breakfast, for instance, or dessert. Okay, another example, again from Give Me 5, level 5, and it's again marked thinking skills, because again this is all about categorizing. Can you think of 10 activities that you do outdoors, as opposed to, as you can figure out, indoors? Okay, so again, the categorizing, or in other words, we can help learners develop cognitively without necessarily, using complex activities, complex and elaborate language tasks. Sometimes it's enough to ask the proper question, like in the example here. Point 3 on my agenda is memorizing. I can see that I need to speed up a little bit. So memorizing. I am not going to show you, however, different mnemonic devices or strategies for helping learners boost the memory. I am focused on something completely different. That is the notebook, which usually looks like this. Okay, I decided to put the Romanian words here because I'm currently studying Romanian. So it's round, runda, smaller, mai mic, bigger, mai mare, steps, trepte, toes, degetele, de la picioare, which kind of is a proof of why I'm finding it so hard to learn the language, because having 4 different difficult words for one short toes, it's really tells a lot about the language. Anyway, this is what a regular notebook looks like, right? And I can guarantee that for the student, for any student really, rewriting this from the blackboard, just like looking around the runda and writing it down in the notebook, there is no thinking involved. There are no cognitive skills required. There is no cognitive engagement. This is what we can do to make students think while they complete the language, the notebook. We can ask them, okay, now, write the words in your notebook, but present them visually. So we've got something round, we've got bigger or smaller, there are steps, there are toes, like in the example here, okay? So clearly, it is possible to make students think while they actually write something in their notebook, instead of just rewriting one word after another with the translations. Okay, mind you that as a byproduct, there is we end up with creating associations, right? Because students, which is yet another type of cognitive skills or another category of activities involving thinking skills in this particular, because in order to figure out something like this, you need to first make an association. Another example of a task, which is not a task really, but a note from the lesson, is the one that you can see in the slide. Yes, it is supposed to look like the McDonald's French fries. Okay, there are 2 red cups. In this particular example, you've got there isn't, and there are some, there aren't any. The slips inside the yellow papers imitating the French fries are either words in singular or plural. What happens is that students, write them on the separate pieces of paper and they put them into the right cup. One very important kind of benefit of such activity is that they can be done multiple times. You won't ask the student to just go home and rewrite a list of words with their translation. You can, however, tell students to go home, take out all of these slips of paper and put them, like shuffle, and put them back again, okay? Mind you that this is not limited to singular and plural nouns. You can have regular and irregular verbs. You can have countable and uncountable nouns, and so on and so forth, okay? But it definitely, mind you that with this particular activity, apart from memorizing, we make students categorize as well, kind of makes the whole thinking process a bit more elaborate or advanced. And the last point for today is solving problems. Now, very simple activity of how to make students, help students solve problems is the following. Ask them different riddles, okay? Take a look at these. Can you figure out what kind of lesson they come from? In other words, what kind of lexical set am I practicing with these particular riddles? Look, when is your uncle's sister not around? Oh yes, family members, exactly, family members. So guys, let's do these activities together. So, when is your uncle's sister not around? Anybody? Mom, very nice. When is your mother? Tom and Tina are brother and sister. Tom has 3 brothers. How many brothers does Tina have? 4, very nice. Very quick responses, really. Brian's mother had 3 children. The first child was called April. The second was called May. What was the third child's name? Obviously, Brian and not June. Okay, thank you very much for this. So, and I guarantee that the internet is full of such riddles. You can even kind of Google riddles about family members, riddles about days of the month, the names of the month, riddles about days of the week. and so on. And it kind of makes students, mind you, kind of process the names of the family members in this case several times, but actually the purpose in the activity is kind of different because they are having fun doing the riddles. Another example of such problem-solving activity is the following. And actually, I would say that this is what we should be looking for in a modern in a modern course book. That is activities, or in other words, comprehension activities, right, attached to different texts that make students think and not only look for specific information in the text. Look at what we have here. There is the Nico's message, choose the t-shirt for Heidi and Jen. And Nico says, do you like shopping for clothes? I want to buy t-shirts for my 2 friends, but I can only spend 15 euros. And then, so he can spend 15 euros. You've got the prices here, the colors are here. Now, Heidi loves fashion. She often wears smart clothes at the weekend, but she usually wears casual clothes for school and so on. And then Jen isn't very interested in fashion. She never wears bright colors and yellow and orange. See, so it's not that students are looking for specific information, but we should engage students in such reading practices or in such reading activities in which they have to solve problems as well, because this is when we put the whole reading activity to a higher level, to a higher order thinking skills level. Okay, then, a short summary, and I'm ready for your questions. I'd like you to remember from this session that cognitive engagement is not an obstacle, but it's actually helpful when it comes to a linguistic development, because deep processing and effort that the brain actually makes the language students are learning much more memorable. Students are able, with deeper processing, with cognitive engagement, and with effort, students are able to or will remember the material better and for longer. And it's all about putting the cogwheels, at work. So, well, good luck with that, and thank you very much.
Carolina, hi, thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, excellent, perfect. Thank you so much. Such an interesting session. I really loved the topic of thinking skills. It's such an engaging one, and you've got so many comments in the chat box. I mean,
yes, and they are so fast that I could.
Yeah,
I'm totally unable to refer to.
Yeah, so many thank yous.
Questions, perhaps.
So many great ideas. People, I think, are really appreciative of all the tips and the activities.
I'm glad to hear that. Are there any questions? I can see that there are some questions in the question.
There were a couple, yeah. There's a couple of lower order thinking skill questions for you, and there's a couple of higher order thinking questions for you. So I'll start with the lower ones first. Sure. First person was, how many languages do you speak?
Oh, English, fluent, very basic German, Polish, which is my native, and very basic Romanian.
That's good. Nice easy one. The next easy one, can you please tell us what's the name of the Herbert Puchta book that you kept referring to? Oh, it's here. It's on the page.
It's here. Actually, it's right here, yeah. And it's also, guys, it's in the handout that I've prepared from this session. So the handout includes this bibliography.
Yeah, perfect. So everybody will get that in their email.
Yes, that's true.
Perfect.
A brilliant book, a brilliant book.
We've got a couple of minutes, so let's engage with a slightly more difficult question. So I know that you're a DOS of a primary school, but people have been asking about different age groups. Like, do you have any tips or advice around using thinking skills and developing cognitive skills for either pre-primary? Someone from Indonesia said that they teach kindergartens. So how do they start to introduce thinking skills? And another person mentioned that they teach teens. So how can they, so are there different types of thinking skills for different ages, or are they all applicable?
Actually, the ones that I have presented today are kind of, similar or the same for different age groups. Now, come to think of the pre-elementary or preschoolers, right? If we show students different words, because this is what we usually work with, individual words, they can still categorize words, like some of these are animals and others are, I don't know, school items, a very basic one. Even if the lexical set that we are dealing with is, I don't know, 8 very basic words, or the students can categorize and then we kind of introduce a little bit of CLIL at the same time, animals that live in the water and animals perhaps that live in the air, which, at the level of a preschooler, this is really advanced, thinking skill, really. And for teenagers, I would say basically more like, see, the categories, the types of thinking skills will be the same. It's just the feed, the linguistic input will be slightly different, okay? All of these, the activities that I've shown you, the Venn diagram with the odd one out, they are also suitable for teenagers, right? It just probably the words will be different. Or even if we are talking, because the books that I've just the Give Me 5, level 5, this is pretty advanced linguistically, right? So I can imagine a teenager 3 years older, right, as a target group, but basically at the same linguistic level or even lower, right? So we can still engage them in the odd one out activities. I've recently written this book for secondary school students, and yes, I did include some odd one out activities as well. So they are not relevant only for kids.
Yes, no, I agree, and I think that's it's the message that kind of came across for me was it's about challenging students, taking them as far as each student can go.
This is
the
like,
activity. Go on.
This is how we learn. If you don't make effort, you're not going to learn anything. I can give you an example of us learning as adults, and I'm 100% sure that something like that happened to each and every one of you. It definitely happened to me. Learning for the exams during the studies, I was learning, how was I learning? I was reading the notes, going over the notes once or twice. But the third time I was kind of going through the notes, my brain began to recognize what's on the page. So I thought, I know it, right? I already know it. But my brain didn't do absolutely any effort trying to learn the information. So you stay at home, you read the notes, you think, well, it sounds familiar, I already know it. And then you go to the exam room and blank. Your mind goes blank. You can't recall anything, because before your brain didn't make any effort to actually remember that information. You didn't quiz yourself. You didn't ask, yourself questions, or you didn't cover the notes and try to recall something, from memory. So this is just an example of how important that effort is for the brain, for any learning, really.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways that we can take that information and retain it as well. And different people find different ways to do it. So,
of course,
help your students to find ways that work for them. I think that's important. Yes. Perfect. Well, we've run out of time. I know there was a few other questions, we didn't get to them, but there's loads of support around thinking skills on the Macmillan English website and One Stop English as well. There's loads of blogs that have been written on both of those websites, so do go and check them out. And there's loads, maybe they will answer the questions that didn't get answered now. Carolina, thank you very much. I will let you rest for a little while, because I know you have another session later this evening.
Very later this evening.
Yeah. If you stop screen sharing, I will start,
Sure.
And then we'll move on to the next. As you may have noticed, people were saying so much that they loved all of the ideas, and all of these ideas have been taken from our primary course book, which is Give Me 5. Give Me 5 is one of my favorites primary course books. It's very engaging. There's loads of project work, hands-on things for students to do, and it's all built around cooperative learning. So do go and check out this book. We've got a session on it, one of the parallel sessions, so they will definitely tell you more about it, showing you how to enhance participation, learner autonomy, social competence, all of these things which take kind of center stage in this particular course book. 6 levels, as you can see, taking you right through primary school.